We're incredibly excited to be working with Timothy Taylor's throughout the Ashes. They're a proudly independent Yorkshire brewery that's been brewing proper cask ales since 1858. Their flagship beer, The Landlord, is a real classic, a multi-award-winning ale loved by brewers and drinkers alike. Proper beer, brewed the right way, perfect for watching the cricket. Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast. We're a few days away from the pink ball test at the Gabba. Why do these tests exist and how does the pink ball actually behave? Ben's with us today, the world's preeminent pink ball test oracle, to tell us exactly what happens in these sort of games. There's some England injury news, selection, speculation, and another all-timer win for South Africa in India. I'm Yaz Rana, and with me today are Ben Gardner and Phil Walker. Mark Butcher will be joining us in part two. Guy on the Discord asks, what have you all been doing with your time in this bleak Ashes test hinterland? Ben, let's start with you. Why are you wearing sunglasses at 10:48 on a December morning?
Yeah, I've given myself...
It's 110 miles to Chicago.
I've given myself a black eye just so I can be like Steve Smith and see that pink ball really well. I think the light will reflect as well. I got an injury playing rugby on the weekend, but I think the listeners don't want to hear about my length of the field intercept try, or the fact that I had a long discussion with the ref about the regulations of the Middlesex merit table playing regulations.
That doesn't sound like you.
Yeah. I was
you literally phoned me up yesterday under some sort of vague excuse to talk about work, but really just to tell me about your full lengther, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then blowing kisses to your girlfriend on the side of the pitch.
Yeah.
Was this pre or post getting your face smashed up?
Well, I think the injury might have happened, but the swelling hadn't yet properly started.
Right,
so,
show it then. Come on.
Just for the YouTubers.
Just a quick look, and then you'll see why it's better that I have the sunglasses on. Yeah.
Your Timothy Taylor sunglasses.
Timothy Taylor sunglasses, yeah.
So the second test starts on Thursday morning. 4 a.m. starts for those of you in the UK. Get up at 6:40 and you get 2 full sessions in. This is a pink ball day-night test match. Because England don't play too many of these, I thought it would be worth explaining why these exist in the first place before we get on to how they're different to normal test matches. So this is the 25th day-night test. They were introduced as a way of getting bigger audiences in, both in the ground and on TV. It's not really taken off anywhere in the world other than in Australia. 13 of the 24 so far have been in Australia. Australia have won 12 of those 13 games.
How many have we had in England?
One in England in 2017.
So that Edgbaston game.
And it was basically binned off because they realised it doesn't really actually get that dark in the England midsummer.
But it does get really cold. So.
But it gets really cold, so it's much, much worse for the spectators.
Is that when Cook got 200
and Root got 100, his only pink ball 100 from 7.
Against West Indies.
Yeah, and Root's played in all 7 for England. And they use a pink ball rather than a red ball because that brighter pink ball is more visible than its red counterpart under lights. Phil, do you like pink ball test matches?
Don't mind. Don't mind the idea. I was quite keen to see it play out a little bit more in England. But then, we don't really have problems with getting people through the doors, and that was the essential point of it. I think it was a TV move in England, but it was binned off quite quickly. It works in Australia overall. It certainly works for Australians because they win every game they play in it. But I've been present at pink ball games in Australia, and there is a real marvellous atmosphere as you move through the evening. It's appointment to view stuff. As a spectacle, from a fan's point of view, it's great. From a player's point of view, there aren't too many that like it, certainly not who bat for a living. And Steve Smith's comments this week, I thought were quite telling, really. I mean, Root said something very similar and very similar toned over the weekend, and obviously got dog's abuse for it because this is where we've got to. But Smith said, well, they're good for the punters, not so good for me. Hence why he's wearing these black stickers under his eyes to try and improve his visuals. But
really not sure on the science behind that.
No, it's the Chandapal thing. But if it's a placebo, then so be it. Whatever, really. But yeah, personally, I don't mind the sense of slightly increased jeopardy going into a day-night game because conditions dictate cricket matches regardless. If it's grimly overcast at 10:30, 11 in the morning at Leeds or Old Trafford, then you know that the ball's going to be skewed in favour of the bat. So, and other days it's going to be the other way around, obviously. So I don't personally have that big an issue with it. And I think if it's going to work anywhere, then it is in Australia, where they have the conditions for the fans. It's going to be balmy through the evening. But also, the ball does do more, for sure. But also, you can really fill your boots in the early part of the day. And I think I guess one of the criticisms would be that the toss becomes ever more important. The question from an English point of view is, can Ben Stokes just win every single toss for the rest of his life?
Yeah, I actually think that for this one, the toss is less important because...
Really?
Yeah.
I thought it was very much a win, toss, bat, and then you dictate the game.
Sure. So most day-night test matches in Australia have been at Adelaide. This game's at Brisbane. And at a very simple level, the sun sets 2 hours earlier, pretty much, in Brisbane. So that crazy period, and Ben's going to tell us the numbers in a second, where lots of wickets fall as it's getting dark, that's going to happen earlier in the day. And the pink ball is...
So it'll be more of a crapshoot then?
Yeah, so the pink ball tends to do lots with the new ball. Then with the old ball, when it's light, batting tends to be pretty easy, relatively speaking. And then under lights, it becomes very, very difficult. That's going to happen earlier. So I think that the toss is slightly less important than it normally is in those games. I mean, Ben, you have done as much research as it is possible to do for one game of cricket. Tell us how a pink ball test match differs from a red ball one.
Yeah, so I think that the most obvious way is that, or the most basic way is that pace is more dominant than it is in day tests, both in terms of averages and in terms of overs bowled. So pace bowlers average way less, spin bowlers average slightly less as well, but much less degree than pace bowlers do. And that means that you see a lot more pace bowled, because not only is it sort of more effective than spin, but you also have less of a need for a spinner because these games tend to be quicker. So in Australia, 5 of the tests, the day-night tests have been 3 days, 5 have been 4 days, and there's been 3 day 5 finishes and no day-night draws in Australia yet. You can really see that this new ball effect, so in the first 20 overs, about a third of wickets fall inside the first 20 overs of a new ball, either first or second. And also, you see that third session effect as well, where about as many wickets have fallen in the first session than in the first session. You think there's...
Wait, just say again?
About as many wickets have fallen in the third session as in the first session, and a lot fewer in the second session. So that backs up what you were saying. And that's often where you see where the clumps of wickets fall in third sessions. And also, there are going to be fewer third sessions in test matches than first sessions, if you see what I mean, because each day starts the first session, but not every day ends with a third session because test match might finish. So that in particular, you see that opening bowlers averages are less, openers averages are way down. So that is the thing. And then the other thing that stands out is just that, you know, Australia have some players who have some amazing pink ball records, both bowling, but also a couple of their batters who will be really key. So Stark is obviously the day-night king, 81 wickets, which is almost twice the next best. Who's Cummins with 43. Stark averages 17. Cummins and Hayward also have brilliant day-night records, but actually the best record is Boland's, who's 18 wickets at 13. And then batting-wise, Head and Labuschagne are the ones that stand out. Labuschagne is almost like the Stark of batting in day-night tests, averages 64, got the most runs, Head averages 51. I guess the one chink of light for England is that the rest of Australia's batters don't have great records. Steve Smith is a bit more human. He's also only got the 100 day-night tests. Usman Khawaja's record is only okay. Cam Green, Alex Carey, not great. So if they do go with this plan for Head to open and then Labuschagne at 3, and you've got this new ball window where you can make inroads, maybe if they can get those two with the new ball and the rest are a little bit less suited to day-night tests, but they'll be combating the fact that their players have some not great rockers. In particular, I think the weird one is Stokes, who, if you think that he's a brilliant player of pace bowling generally, and he's someone who can swing it lows, and that's the thing with the pink ball, they have this extra lacquer on it that means it should swing more. He should be swinging it lows and he should be thriving because there's not as much spin to bat, and yet he averages 19 with the bat and 49 with the ball in day-night tests. So that is something that if he can correct that, and if he can maybe expose Head and Labuschagne early on and then find a way past the rest, maybe there's a little route to victory there. But it's there's a reason why Australia's so good in them for sure.
Yeah, just to counter a bit, the West Indies Brisbane game, which was a day-night game at the start of last year, so we're getting on for the best part 2 years ago now. But it actually subverted a lot of the accepted norms in that West Indies batted first in so-called normal conditions, lost a few up top, and then actually consolidated under lights on the day one to get up to 260 odd for 8. And then the following day, it was Australia's top order in decent conditions before the lights take effect that were blown away. And then the game rolled on. Travis Head got a pair, by the way, just in parenthesis. And then Shamar Joseph won the game on the 4th morning, I think it was. But again, when the light was natural. So that extraordinary spell was delivered, albeit with a pink ball in his hand, but it was delivered under normal conditions overhead at least. So the accepted wisdom of day-night test matches are established with good reason. I can't take you seriously at all. when you turn to me. No, it's better this way, but I just can't take you seriously. More generally, I just can't take you seriously.
Would an eye patch be better? Or
Good question. One eye patch cool, 2 eye patches less cool.
Should we ask Timothy Taylors if they've got branded eye patches?
Anyway, just on that game, you're right, Stark was irresistible, although they kept him at bay in the second innings, did the West Indies. But all of the assumed norms of day-night test matches, pink ball test matches, were actually subverted in that particular game. And it was at the Gabba. So, you know, shards of light, chinks of light, or maybe just vast French doors wide of light for England. Who can say?
yeah, I guess what I would say, I think on that first day in that test, there was a wicketless middle session, I think, which helped us out of the game. And then in the end, they took a few wickets. But what was also interesting in that game...
So they were 4 or 5 down quite quickly. They were in fact, they were 5 down for 60, and then they put on 150 in the middle. De Silva and Kevin Sinclair put on runs. And then they lost a couple towards the end, but they finished that day 270 odd for 8.
So the new ball does stuff, even if it's not under lights, the new ball just does a bit more. So you've really got to cash in that middle session. What's also interesting in that game, and this was something that Rob Smythe asked actually, is there a case for a funky declaration, which was probably the funkiest day-night declaration came in that game when Australia declared 289 for 9. So there's not been any declarations been really, really funky, just a few 9 down things to get a few more overs. But in that game, Cummins was 64 not out, so arguably left a few out there. And Australia declared 22 behind, took 1 wicket in the overs before stumps, but then lost by 8 runs. You could say that maybe hasn't worked, but actually...
The last time that England played a day-night test match, they had a funky declaration that did work.
Exactly, yeah. So they declared 325 for 9, but being England, they'd made that 325 in about 60 overs. So had a good...
Which game was that?
That was against New Zealand, and they took 3 wickets in 18 overs before stumps in that game. So you can make the case that it did work. And
if Stokes does a day one declaration, then I'm throwing another iPad into the sea.
So another one?
Well,
when was the first one?
I had to be restrained from throwing the iPad that I was watching the Edgbaston game on from chucking it in the Baltic Sea.
Yeah. Also, with the earlier sunset, I do wonder if it's harder to do a funky day one declaration if you think the bit where the ball's going to do the most and visibility is at its worst is actually going to be relatively early on in the day. I think it's going to be towards the very end of the second session, start of the third. That makes a cheeky declaration much harder, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing with these day-night test matches. They're not actually very homogenous. You get some where the pitches, are real roads, and then you have like lush outfield, so you're not getting reverse swings. That's helping to preserve the ball. Or you get others where there's a bit of grass left on that doesn't scuff up the ball, and then it is doing all sorts. I think the key thing is almost adaptation in the middle of a game, and that is something that England have sometimes. Sometimes they've done it really well. Think back to, I guess, was it Headingley early this year when they countered Jadeja really well. Sometimes they come up with a really good plan in the middle of a game. Sometimes they just play their way and realise too late that it's not the way for those particular set of conditions, and we won't know until we get there whether this is going to be a surface that is going to do all sorts, or it's going to be one of these flat day nights where you can go out and just take your all out and get 550. So and that's the other thing is it's not just as broad as daytime easy, under lights hard, but specifically Batter seems to talk about a twilight period where the lights are in effect but the sun is going down, and that's when visibility is tough. And actually when the lights are fully in effect, it can be a bit easier to bat. And so as you say, that makes that declaration case a little bit less.
If you're an alien coming to the game fresh, then you must be pretty baffled by all of this chat, though. When Steve Smith, the best player in the world, is saying, well, I can't really see it. To be honest, hands up, I can't really see it. When obviously you have white ball under lights, ODIs, and everyone thinks, well, that's fine. That's cool. Nothing to see here, folks. But yeah, but the tinted difference in the ball seems to throw everybody off kilter completely.
That's a really good point, actually, because especially that twilight period, that exists in every single day-night ODI that's ever been played.
And also there is a lot of piss and wind, I think, around how precious batters are regarding this stuff. Courtney Brown, the old West Indies wicketkeeper, I remember interviewing him randomly about the Champions Trophy game.
I did not think you'd bring up Courtney Brown.
Well, he was batting at the end of the Champions Trophy game with Ian Bradshaw when they beat the English, and Harmison was bowling 90 odd mile an hour, and it was in the dark. It was a madness completely, but they somehow won that game. White ball in the dark, no lights. For some reason, they didn't play with lights at that point, even though they were there at the Oval. And he said, in West Indies, mate, bad light is just a state of mind. He said, you just accept that bad light is a part of the game, and, you know, iffy light, I can't look at you. Iffy light and all the rest of it is just all priced in, really. And yeah, I think players can get a little bit oversensitive to this stuff. I think ultimately it's all part of the fun. You know, I like the fact that it's an anomaly within a 5-test series. And it threw up that great win for the West Indies that possibly wouldn't have happened if the odds had been more conventionally stacked, against a lesser team. You know, so reasons not to be totally downcast if you happen to have the misfortune to have been born on this sceptred isle.
Right, that's it for part 1. In part 2, Mark Butcher. Now it's the 1st of December, we can officially say that Christmas is approaching and it's the perfect time to stock up. Naked Wines bring you high quality wines from independent makers with bottles matched to your taste. Head to nakedwines.co.uk/wisdom to grab an £80 voucher and 12 top rated wines for £64.99, including delivery. Links are all in the description below. Butch, first of all, do you like that pink ball tests exist?
I don't mind them, I guess, in hot countries where the sunset kind of is pretty emphatic. You know, you don't get the long periods of twilight that you do in the UK. Basically, I don't mind them anywhere other than in the UK. I think here they're a disaster. I obviously the reason behind them in the first place was to kind of, to encourage viewership in the grounds. I'm not entirely sure. I kind of agree with Joe Root's sentiments, really, the fact that with an Ashes test, you kind of don't need extra encouragement, and therefore perhaps it's a little bit superfluous. But it is, it is a unique game in that the conditions can veer wildly during the course of a test match. I'm not sure that's a good thing, to be honest with you. But it does offer up, as far as this series is concerned, it offers up another opportunity, huge opportunity for England if they can kind of maintain a little bit of discipline to go along with their natural attacking instincts to drag a test match back, to win a first test there since 2010-11. So on that score, it can't be that bad.
Stuart Broad said that conditions are a bit of a lottery in pink ball tests. Knowing what we do know about how pink ball tests tend to play out, Ben's done some particularly comprehensive research on this. You said
extremely comprehensive,
potentially too comprehensive for your liking. But knowing what conditions are likely to be, that the new ball tends to be more dangerous whenever it is used in pink ball test matches, and that when you have that twilight period, that can be particularly dangerous, and particularly in Brisbane compared to the Adelaide pink ball test that we've seen in the past. Sunset is quite a lot earlier than in Adelaide. It's not something we often talk about in Test cricket, but that could mean that the chaos could happen earlier in the day. And anyway, pink ball tests tend to be shorter than red ball games. So knowing what conditions could be like, what do you think England can do to counteract what we may expect to see?
I mean, it's extremely tricky, isn't it? Which is part of the reason why I think Joe has come out saying that he doesn't particularly enjoy pink ball cricket. In that test matches over the course of 5 days, you're meant to get a lot of tactical elements anyway. But you throw in the sort of like the idea that sort of not being batting at a particular time of day during a test match becomes a huge factor. And you are, you really are sort of messing around with the game to an extent that perhaps it doesn't need it. And in terms of them being, faster than Red Bull games, if it's any faster than Perth, then we are in for. We won't be getting our body clocks into too much of a mess watching this one. But no, I think the toss becomes slightly less crucial. I don't think either side is going to be looking forward to winning it because, as you say, the new ball, whether it's under lights or at the beginning of a day's play or day one, tends to be pretty potent either way. From what we're hearing, conditions at the Gabba, which for me has always been, I think, the best Test match pitch in Australia, in terms of the fact that it kind of goes through phases that you would hope that a Test match pitch would go through. The bowlers tend to be on top first morning. It then flattens out, becomes hard work for the bowlers. Batters make hay. Then it rags, late on in the game, or at least in the Test matches that I played in there. Back in 98, 99, 2002, 2003, that was exactly the pattern that they followed, but the pink ball test and the fact that the pitches tended to be a little bit more spicy in Brisbane than in days gone by have kind of meant that a lot of that stuff goes out the window, and you might be thinking about winning the toss and bowling as a general rule, but then you throw the pink ball side of it into it, and you might be thinking about batting because you don't want to potentially be batting under lights, although that's less likely given that the sunset comes earlier, as you say. So it's very, very confusing. And as a result of that, I think either captain would be very happy not to win it and not have to make the call.
What part of the reason why the first test finished so quickly was Travis Head. Not that many people were expecting it to finish on day 2 at the start of the Australian innings. And in the blink of an eye, really, he wins that test for Australia. And looking at some of the comments from the England camp afterwards, they certainly gave off a sense that the game was over before they realised what was happening to them. Wherever Head bats in this game, whether he opens or bats at 5, if he gets in one of those moods again, what can England do to slow things down? Because it felt like, that game was over so quickly before they really could come up with a plan B against him.
Yeah, I think really it's you kind of want him to be playing the ball down the ground as much as possible with a vertical bat as opposed to a horizontal one. I think anytime you give him the opportunity to play with a horizontal bat, cross-batted strokes, you're playing very much into his hands. He stays slightly leg side of the ball. He's always looking for the short ball, particularly against England, who have kind of gone at him with that throughout the contests that they've played against each other. And quite often he's come out on top with that. And so I think, part of what I think Stokes was alluding to in terms of, sort of a mea culpa, holding his hands up to sort of what happened there, was that he got very, very quickly went to sort of short ball, no catches behind the wicket, everybody out in the boundaries and all that kind of stuff. And whilst, that tactic can work, once that guy with his incredible hand-eye coordination and his love of being able to play horizontal bat shots, he kind of, with only 200 on the board, as soon as the runs go below 100, you're stuffed, aren't you? So you kind of got to find a way of making him hit the ball where he doesn't want to, which means keeping the ball up to the bat, bringing the stumps into play, trying to challenge the outside edge with him playing with a straight bat. I mean, it's not rocket science, and something that I think that they will look back on and have looked back on and thought that was a huge mistake on their part. I mean, I suppose you could say, well, it caught them a bit cold. They wouldn't have been expecting him to come out first and all the rest of it. And all of those things kind of played into his hands a little bit. But, he's the most dangerous player in their side, no matter what. My feeling is he'll go back to 5. I think that's that was a one-off and it worked for that particular set of circumstances. But Australia will feel with the danger, as I read in Ben's very comprehensive report, the openers tend to have an absolute nightmare in day-night test matches. It's very, very difficult. And so they would be loath to lose an asset like that when the ball is hard and new and anybody can get out early, as opposed to the damage he might be able to do if the top order do their job and kind of see off the newness and allow him to go to work down at the bottom. So I'd imagine he'd bat at 5. But you've got to keep the ball up to him, I think. I think he might slam you back over your head, yes. But I think the odds are very much more in your favour if you do that.
most of the discourse around England's approach centres on their approach with the bat. There's a very interesting interview that Jason Gillespie did about a year ago, just after the England tour of Pakistan. He was the Pakistan head coach, and he was reflecting on what coaching a side against England was like. And he said, the key thing is basically to be patient with bat and ball. And he said, with the bat, the patience is important because he felt that England get bored quite quickly. And if a plan doesn't work with seam, they tend to just bounce you. Do you think England use the short ball too often and too early sometimes?
Yeah, I think so. I've thought that at home, that it's kind of it. I don't know. When England first started to use that as a tactic, they'd kind of, obviously Anderson and Broad were playing, or at least Broad was playing. And I know that Broady didn't particularly enjoy doing it very much. He sort of felt, well, I want to exhaust my options as with my skill as a bowler, pitching the ball up and moving it around off the seam before we go to that particular ploy. And I think it works great against teams that you can bully. They kind of, give up and sort of have a flap and get out and wander off. But I think against a top team, you're better off going the more traditional route for as long as you possibly can. I have no issue with using it as a, if all else fails, this is what we're going to go for, and you go for it 100% as they tend to do. But particularly when a pitch is still is offering you something, and the conditions say pitch the ball up, that the percentages are in your favour if you do that. I think it's a waste. And the flip side, not the flip side, but the downside of doing that is that if you do it for 10 overs, and I'm not talking about the first test match so much, but if you do it for 10 overs with a ball that is relatively new, say lower than 30 overs old, you've smashed all the hardness out of it yourself. You've wrecked the tool that you have to use for future, for going back to bowling line and length, because it's now soft and won't do anything. So you've got to be very careful, I think, about going to that tactic and about who you use it to. I mean, there will be some players that it's a better option than others. And I would suggest that Head has proven over quite a few test matches now that even though it looks as though he's not very comfortable with it, it doesn't seem to damage him as much as it damages us.
No Mark Wood.
Yeah.
For the first test match, Shoaib Bashir was a spare man in the squad. We know that spin bowlers don't tend to be used that much in Australia. What do you think they'll do?
What I hope they'll do is what they didn't do in the first one and play Jacks or Bethel at 8 with 4 seamers. That's what I hope they'll do. I think Perth proved that 5 was one too many. 5 quicks was one too many. And when you could very easily sort of chuck an extra batter in there, and another game where we think that the game is going to finish short of 4 days at least, the extra runs are going to come in much more useful than another bowler, another quick bowler. And so that's what I hope they'll do. I hope either Jacks or Bethel plays and bats at 8. Although I'm hearing that Josh Tongue has sort of been flown back and is looking like he's ready to go, so they might go with 5 again. Which again kind of begs the question around the toss. I think the record, as far as these pink ball test matches go, is batting first ends up being slightly more successful than bowling first. However, if you feel like five quicks is the way to go, then you'd probably, that's signalling bowl first to me, for 2 reasons. One, because you feel that the conditions are going to be very spicy, and 2, come the last innings of the game, which you're predicting or presuming is going to be within the somewhere around the end of day 2 or the beginning of day 3, that at that point the pitch will be playing as flat as it has done throughout the entire match. So it's an interesting one, but I'd go with the extra batter for sure, who also offers you a bit of spin.
Yeah, there's a danger with all these things of us all having the same opinion, because we talk to each other quite a lot. But I'm minded to have the extra batter as well. Jacks at 8, mainly because in the first test match, I thought Jamie Smith looked really good. And in the first innings, he runs out of partners so quickly. And I know that Carson Atkinson batted really well in the second innings, but both of them have a real dart. They're not players who, even if it comes off, are likely to be at the crease very long.
Very long, yeah.
Before we go into any series, particularly away series, you just never know who's going to be in nick and who isn't in nick. And Smith actually, Brook aside, probably looked like England's most in nick batter. And if you have someone in good form, you want to use them as much as possible. And I feel like in the first game, England didn't make best use out of Jamie Smith. And having someone like Jax, I think at 8, could mean you get more out of Smith at 7.
Well, no, I completely agree. I know that I think Brody down there was saying about, the 5 quicks is a great idea. But I just think it's fine if you think that the pitch is going to be flat enough that it's going to go 5 days, in which case you probably think about playing a spinner anyway. But again, I use the example of Surrey, who've done that very successfully at home, in particular at the Oval, on pitches that they've started what's felt like early. They're kind of like, it's like they're 2 days out from when you would start normally. And it's been successful for them. They win the toss, they bowl, they get ahead of the game with a cheap first innings, then put the opposition under pressure in innings 3. And then by the time fourth innings comes around, which England are very much the masters of, they're so much better batting last than they are batting first. The pitch actually is playing at its best by the time you get there. So for lots and lots of reasons, I was baffled by England's selection and then their decision to bat first in that first test. And I think doing it with 5 quicks again will throw up exactly the same conundrum for them. But I just see any game that's short, where runs are at a premium, and you can play extra batters, do it. In the past, it was difficult because you didn't have an all-rounder batting at 6 who was one of your top frontline bowlers, but we have one in Stokes. And so you use that advantage and play another batter.
Well, let's leave it there for today. I'll see you on the next weekly episode that is supposed to be next Monday, but it could easily be Friday morning.
It could be Friday, yeah, it could be. I mean, I would have said before we started, before the Perth Test match, I thought 3.5 days, that would be about as long as that one goes. And I reckon similar for this one before we start. So we could be surprised either way, longer or shorter.
Cricket 26 is out now, available to buy. The new game from Big Ant Studios, bringing you closer to the game than ever before. Take command in the all-new management career mode, engage in the intensity of the Ashes and build your dream squad. With enhanced gameplay, smarter fielding and total control at the crease, every shot, every strategy, every victory is yours. Cricket 26 is available to buy now. Phil, we've got an Australia squad. Pat Cummins isn't in it, but people are saying that he still might play. Usman Khawaja is in the squad. Some speculation over his spot in the side and whether or not Travis Head might open the batting again at Brisbane. If you're England, what would you least like to see Australia do?
Oh, it's a really good question. Usman Khawaja looks like he's hanging in there, and the numbers bear that out. But he is a pedigree cricketer. I don't know. You caught me on the hop here. Let me have a think. Let me have a think about this, and then you can cut it. Okay. All right. I think it's almost counterintuitive to say that after what Head did to them a week ago, they wouldn't mind seeing him open the batting. But there is some kind of fuzzy logic in there, right? That with a day-night test adding that extra element of chaos to already a chaotic series, that there's more chance of getting him early with that pink ball up front than having him coming in at 100 for 3, licking his lips. So it could clearly blow up in England's face. And there is something compelling long-term, I think, about having Travis Head in the David Warner role. Not least because I think it opens up that middle order to being able to bring in a Webster who's a cricketer that many people rate with good reason, or a return of Mitchell Marsh, or one of the good young kids coming through in the fullness of time. But in the short term here, I think England won't mind having a run at their most dangerous player in the opening rounds. See if England can throw an open right and see if they can land a couple. Because if they do push him back, then it changes the complexion of an innings, and it doesn't have the spectre of him coming in. When the ball is softer. So yeah, look, he might come out there and just cream a quick one, obviously. But if you are England, to be honest, if you are England, there's value in trying to get at him early, and there's value in getting at Khawaja, who's struggling for runs and is 38, 39-year-old, hasn't scored many runs against pace in the last 12 to 18 months. So however you dice it, it's dangerous, but I don't think England need to be too terrified of Australia's batting lineup, however they position it. The glaring issue is how they're going to counter the ball themselves.
Yeah, I say so. Ben, one thing I wanted to ask you is, when we were looking at the pink ball numbers, we focus so much on what happens in the first innings when you know when the inning starts, right? And actually, you could have a situation where innings 2 of the game starts towards the end of the first day. The batting side gets through that new ball period unscathed, or only loses 1 or 2 wickets. And then suddenly, someone like a Travis Head, a Steve Smith, Marnus Labuschagne, Harry Brook are coming in the daylight against an older pink ball that theoretically does even less than the older red ball. So that's actually, I think, a pretty good argument for Head batting in the middle order.
Yeah, well, I think that they've talked about maybe having some flexibility about, assessing conditions, seeing when is going to be the easiest to bat, when they can most make the use of Head's unusual abilities, basically. And that might be that, yeah, as you say England do maybe bat through that first day and then are all out early on the second day. Like, okay, it's actually going to be all right for batting to start with. Head goes out and open, cashes in, or you might go the other way. I guess the other thing in terms of the team balance is with this strange Cummins factor where he's not in the squad, but they still haven't ruled him out somehow, and saying that he could still make a late run into it, and all of a sudden comes out, someone in a mask comes out to the toss and takes off, and it's Cummins there. But I wonder.
Sorry, can I just ask? So is this just murmurs in the press, or have coaches actually come out and said this is a possibility?
Players and coaches both said it. Yeah.
So obviously he'll be with the team anyway, but he's just not named in the official squad.
Yeah, but still somehow might play.
But I also brought a question. I don't really understand where the sanctity of the squad announcement comes from. Like, why are England for the first Test match announcing a 12-man squad when they've got a squad of 16? What's the point?
Have they done that?
They did that for the first Test match.
Sorry, yeah.
48 hours out, say, here's the 11 with Bashir in it. Any combination, this 11 plays.
It is an odd one.
Same with Australia naming the squad for the second Test match a week out for the game, but also saying at exactly the same time, well, actually, someone not in the squad could play.
Yeah, no, very, very odd. And also, England actually managed to not name an 11 however long in advance, 24 hours in advance this time, but had the 12, whereas Australia did name their team in advance. Yeah, that is odd. But I think the thing, if they were tempted to risk Cummins, I think you could possibly get insurance by Head opening and then a Webster at 5, and you've got 2 all-rounders in there, and then 3 or 4 quicks, depending on if Cummins comes in for Doggett or for Lyon. But my instinct is, and also Australia kind of like to stick to their guns. They're actually sometimes quite conservative in selection in a way that quite helps them. And I think that actually Khawaja, even though he's had a slightly messy week with, criticising the Perth pitch and them asking him to explain his comments, that's kind of, they know that Khawaja is going to do that kind of thing and they're fine with it. And they obviously rated Khawaja for the first game, and I don't think him having one innings where everyone else also struggled is going to turn it
also, he got
too much.
Absolutely
the best ball of the game, pretty much.
I actually think the bigger thing is sort of what the chat around Mark Wood playing. I know Mark Wood's been ruled out of the second Test match. Is that, can you trust Khawaja's body? He is a guy who's about to turn 39. For all the conversations about him playing that round of golf before the first day, I think he hurt his back when taking a catch on the first day. It's just an injured out, and why play someone? This would be the argument. Why play someone who's not in great form and an injury risk? Yeah,
that's fair. And I guess we won't know, how bad that injury risk is and whether it is the kind of back spasm or whatever that they can see recurring. We think, okay, that's a one-off thing that just happens, but we think you're sort of fit enough in general. But yeah, that is fair enough. So yeah, if he's an injury doubt, then for sure you go with, I guess, Head opening, and then that allows you to probably play the all-rounder, or maybe Inglis, who in the head role can sort of be a bit of a decent deputy in that middle order.
A lot of discourse last week was around whether or not the England players should have played the pink ball warm-up game that the Lions ended up playing against the Prime Minister's 11 in Canberra. Jim and I talked about this on the bonus pod last week. I eventually came around to the view that far too much was being made of it. Conditions in Canberra, both the pitch, in terms of it being much lower bounce than the Gabba, and also the temperature. It was 12 degrees cooler in Canberra than Brisbane over the weekend, were completely unlike what England are going to encounter in Brisbane. So I think people were making a little bit too much of that.
It's just your modern day naughty boy net stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it's an easy stick to hit them with if you're part of the press corps and if you're part of the opinion making battalions out there. Then it's an easy thing to have a go at. But if you actually break it down, then there was very little to have gained from it.
I guess there's just a lot out there. I was just to say there's a lot out there. There are a lot of opinions that didn't take into account the wider picture.
For sure. And also, you know, you can have more practice now in conditions which will replicate the game that you're going to be playing. So it's all part of it. But it's, you know, 5 minutes of actual consideration and looking into the nature of that 2-day knockabout blows the idea out the water that there was any kind of dereliction of duty on the part of this England team. Just on that, by the way, sorry, the notion, this thing that is developing, that they don't give a shit, that they don't care, they don't give a toss, is a wild and totally irrational response to that cricket match. And I've heard some really, really good people peddle that line, some people I really respect, and some friends of mine even in the industry that have been saying this. I don't know what they're watching if they think that. I just don't understand that idea. Can someone try and elaborate on it for me, really? As if they're the style at which they play the game, and which clearly opens up opportunities to beat teams in their own backyard, as we've seen, but which obviously runs the risk of blowing up in their face because they play on the line. How have people misinterpreted that as some kind of sort of wider decadent approach to the game? They don't give a toss. They've been thinking about only this for 2 years, rightly or wrongly, but they've been thinking about only about this for 2 years, and their whole reputations hinge on what's happening here and what's happening over the next few weeks.
I think two things I'd say on that. We've talked before, maybe not on the podcast, but we've certainly talked about it in the office. It's been around England not necessarily being as popular a side in England as you might expect. And I think on that, there is a perception recently, and I think it's a growing one, that there have been quite a few examples over the last 2 years where England have been in very, very good positions in matches and ended up losing, which didn't really happen in the first 1.5 years of McCullum and Stokes.
Because they make bad decisions in the moment, right?
Yeah.
Good cricketers make fallible decisions under pressure, and at times it looks particularly bad when one follows after another. But wasn't that essentially what happened in that mad hour and a half in an otherwise humdinger of a cricket match that could have fallen either way?
100%. And I think that
so where are people then making this enormous jump to assuming that they don't give a toss?
So that is an enormous jump to make, and I think people are wrong in saying that they don't give a toss. I think they're categorically wrong when they say they don't put enough time into their preparation. You speak to any England player who has spanned multiple eras of English cricket, including this one, they will say this lot work as hard as any previous regime. Just the way they prepare is different. I think there's a fair frustration that people have about England squandering very strong position in matches. It is wrong then to make the jump to say that they don't care. That's one thing. Number two, I think outside England, people don't understand the context of what these guys are trying to do. It's a specific, I think Bazball and everything around it is a specific response to where English cricket was at a few years ago with the grimness of the COVID year, England playing some quite dire cricket at times that was not very good to watch. In England, what McCullum and Stokes have done is transformative and new. Outside of England, it's not that new. And I think people outside England haven't enjoyed the Stokes-McCullum experiment as much as people in England, because they're like, well, it isn't actually that new. So I think it's those two things. But I agree with you that the jump to saying that they don't give a shit is ridiculous.
Yeah, I guess that they don't care can also mean something else. It's like they don't care about the game that they're playing or about winning games, but that's not true. They don't care about what anyone thinks of them maybe is true, and that can kind of almost bleed into the two, that when someone is saying...
I have to say, I hope they don't. But I really do hope they don't give a toss what people are saying about them, because what I've heard in the last week and a half has been off the hook. Totally disproportionate to what I saw and what's been happening.
Yeah. But then I think what Yaz's saying as well about, if you think back to the second morning against Sri Lanka at the Oval and to that last day against India at Edgbaston, was it? That was the second test, wasn't it? Where at Edgbaston, it was they just didn't look like they were particularly trying to save that game. They weren't batting like a team trying to save a game, and there have been times when they maybe lose a bit of focus because maybe it's a lack of killer instinct. It's not a lack of effort exactly, but I see how that sort of frustrates people to kind of take the eye off the ball in those kind of situations. But in general, they work very hard, even if it's not in the way that people would like, and they care very deeply about, especially this series.
I think it's fair to say that over the last 2 years, since the start of the 23 Ashes, there have been more than, a handful of games where England have let go of very strong positions. There were good signs of them playing more attritional cricket when conditions demanded that. Lords here against India in the summer. We've talked about that before. England finishing day one in tricky conditions, 251 for 4. But there have been a few games, and I know that they've talked about this a lot on the Talk Sport podcast, that England have played risky cricket when they've been ahead in games, and almost by definition, it doesn't make a lot of sense to play risky cricket when the percentages are otherwise in your favour. On the game itself, by the way, England chased down 309 with ease. James Rue, 92, not out. Haynes, 77. Emilio Gay, 56. Unbeaten once he was retired. Hurt. Gay, by the way, is set to play against England for Italy at next year's T20 World Cup. And yeah, it's quite interesting. Phil, I know you're a fan of Emilio Gay. He's got a lot of runs since moving to Durham. He's done well on this Lions tour. You like the look of him?
Yeah, he has a penchant for a blob, but once he gets past that, he made a pair early in his Durham career at the start of the season, but once he gets past that, he makes big runs. But he makes them in a certain style as well. He looks like a player, left-hander. He plays all around the pitch, all around the track, and he doesn't mind it short either. He made a very good... We've made 200s at the Oval that I've seen both of, and he made a very good 100 for Northants a few years ago, made 140 odd where he climbed into the short ball. He looked good. I think the highlights I saw from that game you mentioned, he looked good. They do really like him, and I can see why. He is one who may actually... Look, if this winter goes wrong, then there'll be one or two players that they will shake hands with, I think, and move on, and... there may well be a slot at the top of that order at some point. And I would say of the pretenders, there's McKinney, teammate there. Tom Haynes is a good player, but they're not too sure about him against the real quicks and against the short stuff. But Emilio Gay has the traits, has the components. You know, we can cross these various bridges when we come to them, but he's a good young player.
Chat for another week. The upcoming Boxing Day test is less than a month away, and it is always one of the standout events on the cricketing calendar. Also, on Melbourne's doorstep, you can discover breathtaking nature and wildlife with incredible food and wine on a road trip through Victoria. If you're heading to Australia this winter, find out more about what Victoria has to offer by going to visitmelbourne.com. Another bit of news. The Wisden Photograph of the Year competition is now open. We're accepting submissions for this year's awards, celebrating the best cricket photography from around the world. Whether you're a seasoned professional or a passionate amateur, we want to see the images that capture the spirit, drama, and beauty of the game. Links for how you can enter the competition are in the description below. Phil, digital magazine is still out.
Yeah, God,
outrageously good deal.
Yeah, 140 pages free. You don't even have to sign up to anything funky or put your details in. You just got to click on a link and a bit of jiggery pokery, and there it is, right for you. 140 pages, all Ashes, and we've already had large numbers have signed up to it. Please join the fun. There is a link at the bottom of the show notes, wherever you pick up this show, and also on YouTube as well. And look, in the build up to this Brisbane game, there's nothing better to read, literally, than that. Plus, if you're a UK reader, dweller, there's a bat going for £600, £600 worth of Grey Nichols beauty. Is going to go to one lucky punter. So there's another reason to sign up. Did I mention it was free?
You did. I still can't believe it's free.
You know what? Nor can our commercial department.
We've been busy on the old Patreon as always. Last week's additional episode was a chat that Joe had with Tim Bresden. They talk about his entire professional career. It talks through breaking through in the Yorkshire first team as a 16-year-old, about winning down under in 10-11, winning his first 13 test matches, becoming a T20 World Cup champion in 2010. But Joe also addresses the Yorkshire racism scandal. Bresden was found guilty of using discriminatory language 2.5 years ago now, and he said very little on the record about his experience of the whole process. So yeah, I'd highly recommend listening to that. It's very interesting. I thought very revealing as well. So go there and have a listen to it yourselves. Phil, we've lost Ben. Ben was here with us. He's no longer with us for the rest of the show. I don't know if it's something to do with his eye. Maybe that works.
He's an enigma. Who can say?
We're obsessed with the Ashes. That's why we led with it again, even though there's been no cricket in the Ashes in the last week. But
I mean, I'm personally done with it. But sure.
South Africa beat India by 408 runs in the second test match. It's their first series win in India in 25 years. Amazing test matches for Marco Jansen, who scored a 93 and took a 6 for both very importantly timed contributions. There's 100 for Senyaran Muthusamy, who's had a brilliant Windsor with both
they
bat
keep
and ball.
churning out these cricketers.
They're ready-made. It reminds
it's
me
remarkable.
It reminds me a bit of New Zealand a few years ago, where somebody would leave the setup, and then the person that comes in is a ready-made, excellent Test cricketer. And Muthusamy initially did really well with the ball. When
Hardly
Maharaj,
bowled in this series, did he?
and then hasn't bowled since Maharaj has come back in the side, but scored loads of runs. And then Simon Harmer, 9 for 101, continuing his outrageous recent form. He was player of the series, 17 wickets at less than 9 runs apiece. Phil, he gave you a ring yesterday morning.
Called me yesterday morning, yeah, just to check in. No, we've been setting up an interview, which I think is happening on Wednesday now this week. But he called me. He was a day out from flying back to South Africa. He's obviously feeling pretty good about life. I think sore head notwithstanding, and it's great vindication for him, because he once said to me when we were chatting away at Chelmsford, and he's got that kind of brusque upfrontness that South Africans have, which I find quite appealing, really, because there's just no varnish to it. And he says, well, for my money, I think I'm the best finger spinner in the world, right arm finger spinner in the world, but no one will ever know that if all I can do is only ever really play county cricket. And this was actually around the time where there were murmurs about him qualifying to play for England. And I think he was open to that as an idea, but obviously his first requirement was to get back into that South African side. And after a few years in the wilderness, really, he managed to break through. It didn't actually go his way initially. He was in that squad that toured England a couple of years ago, and he played at Old Trafford. Didn't really work for him, but given some real pitches with proper spite and a bit of vim and a bit of nastiness, then it shows what an all-timer he is, really, of the 21st century at least. 1,000 first-class wickets, very, very rare to do that these days. I think there's some wear and tear in the body. I think the shoulder issue is an ongoing challenge for him, but he's had this series. Call it a series. I guess you have to. It's a shame, but there be it. But I'm so pleased for him, really so pleased for him, and no one can ever take that away from him, you know. And he will now be able to be at ease with himself, knowing that, given the chance, he upended one of the great cricket teams.
And also, I was really pleased for him in terms of this was the first time really in his test career he got the chance to show how good he can be on more benign spin bowling surfaces. So the first 3 test matches of this 4 test run that South Africa have had in the subcontinent, the first 3 pitches were tailor-made for spinners to dominate. This was not the case. Last week I remember talking to Butch about Indian preparation for home test matches and how particularly spin-friendly tracks might not actually be their best route to victory because it levels the playing field a bit if you have a superior batting lineup. Batting technical skill doesn't come to the fore as much on those pitches. But Harmer's now done this on a pretty flat pitch, one that South Africa were able to score pretty much 500 runs on. And it was that spell from Jansen in the first innings that opened the game up. But Harmer was threatening throughout. And I know that India have a lot of left-handers in their lineup, but his ball to KL Rahul was the ball of the series. Sharp turning off break in the first innings relatively early in the test match and beating a very technically sound batter.
Yeah, and it blows the idea, finally, not that it needed to be, but blows it out the water, the idea that South Africa somehow fluked their way to the final earlier this year at Lord's. They are a very good, resourceful and versatile cricket team. And this now puts to bed any notion that they fell into that final due to the vagaries of the system, of the schedules. A word for Temba as well, my favourite cricketer. I talk about him every week if I could. That 50 odd he made in the first Test match was essential, and he's steered this latest heist really. On Michael Jansen, moving towards being the best seam bowling all rounder in the world.
I think so. I mean,
if you take it across the formats as well, I mean, he smashed a quick 50 odd in about 20 balls in the ODI just gone. Virat made a tidy old 135, by the way. I saw the highlights of that. What a knock! But yeah, Jansen's moving into that bracket, I think.
So I think part of the reason why I think he doesn't get the attention that he deserves is because narratively, other than the WTC win, I think it's quite hard to build narratives around newer South African players who almost exclusively play 2 Test series. So there is just less attention on it. I think the other part of it is that it has been hard to score large volumes of runs in South Africa. So it works both ways. I think someone like Aiden Markram or Temba Bavuma get more credit than their overall averages would normally deserve because people understand that it's difficult to bat in South Africa and those runs need to be seen in that context. The flip side of that is that Mark Jansen, when he's averaging 21 with the ball, that's not actually miles below the average, if that makes sense. But in the same way that it was a significant performance for Harmer doing it on a flatter pitch, it was a really significant performance for Jansen, whose record is absolutely amazing. He's got a test match bowling average of pretty much exactly 21. He's got a strike rate of 38. Is right up there with the very best in the game's history. He's expensive, but that height, he uses his height really well. He gets a lot of good players out with a short delivery, players who otherwise don't necessarily struggle against a short ball. And with the bat, excuse me, I think there's unrealised potential there. He averages 23, but you can see how he can be extremely dangerous. He previously batted as high as 7 in this game. He was batting at number 9. I think 7 or 8 is probably his long-term position, but I think he's a really brilliant cricketer. He's been around for a while, but only played 21 Test matches.
Yeah, the average will only go one way, you think, with the bat. You know, he's such a clean striker of it. Obviously, he's got that reach as well, but he's technically pretty sound. Because he's quite an undemonstrative, unassuming kind of character, perhaps that as well contributes to him not really having the profile. But he's building a body of work across the 3 formats. He's an IPL stalwart as well.
Yeah.
He's a serious cricketer. He's a top tier player now.
Yeah, 100%. And just on India, I'm quite interested to see what the fallout from the series is.
Yeah,
so I think I'm right in saying that India don't play a Test match now for 9 months, which is a really long time.
Yeah.
But they have now got an actively quite poor record at home, having been dominant for so long. And I know that Gill was missing from this Test match, but when you look at that Indian top 7, top 8, it doesn't strike fear into you in the same way that previous Indian batting orders did, even when they weren't that good a side overall. Obviously, Jaiswal and Rahul up top are two world-class players, but beneath that, they keep changing who their number 3 is. There's not a lot of experience in that middle order. They play around with all-rounders quite a lot, and there are lots of really exciting players in there, but you're not quite sure what their specific roles are. Washington sort of bats anywhere on a given week. Nitish Kumar Reddy looks like a really exciting player, but he's playing as a non-bowling number 8 half the time.
Yeah, the selections were peculiar. Sundar batted 3 in the first game.
Yeah.
Sudarshan comes back in. He's not yet pulled up any trees as a first drop. I think you can understand why they like him.
Yeah.
But not really much evidence to go by yet. Pant had a very quiet series. It does happen. It happens to good players. There's perhaps a message in there further afield than just India.
To finish off the show, a story that we will come back to many, many times before the start of the 2026 County Championship. The county schedule has been released, and we talked to Oliver Hannon-Dolby, the PCA chair, about what the schedule might look like a few weeks ago, and he was saying that his concern is not necessarily the volume of games, but how tight that schedule could be. Well, I think Hannon-Dolby's fears were realised with this new schedule. So there are 3 blocks of championship games throughout the season, the traditional April-May burst, a few games in the middle of the summer, and then the games at the end. What's different in 2026 compared to 2025 is just how busy that end of season period is. 6 back-to-back games at the end of the season where every team is playing in all 6 rounds, and it includes a period where there are 12 days of cricket in 16 days, with just 2 days between back-to-back rounds. Phil, obviously it's brutal on the players, specifically the fast bowlers, and also from my point of view as well, I think it damages the rhythm of a county championship season to have 8 rounds across 4.5 months and then 6 in 5.5 weeks.
Yeah. I absolutely sympathise with the players and the position that the PCA have taken up in this instance. I think it undermines the integrity of the competition. September is rightly secured for the county championship finale, but you need to respect it. And having, 12 days of cricket in 16? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
You are essentially saying to the punters and to the players and to the people watching on streams and so on, you've got to bear in mind that the catchment area of county cricket now is bigger than it used to be. You are basically saying to these people, well, look, we have to fulfill a certain number of fixtures and this is how it's got to be, folks. Well, that's not good enough. That's not good enough for the championship. That's not good enough for what that competition means to English cricket. It's not good enough for the players either, who are flogging themselves for 5 months. And then you get to September and then you are being asked for that final lap to go even harder than you've got at any other point. 4-day cricket is hard. Hard on the body, hard on the mind, but specifically on the body. And it penalises smaller teams. If you have a first division where you are a less resourced club, such as Essex, just to pluck a team at random, right? But, it's a legitimate point. Their fast bowling stocks, because their budgets are much smaller, are considerably smaller and more streamlined than a Notts or a Surrey et al. And so if you are asking them to play back-to-back 4-day cricket matches, then not only are you essentially inviting significant injuries to your key men, but you're also stripping a squad so thin that any chance really of one of the smaller teams sustaining a fight for the title becomes severely undermined by that schedule. And obviously, if you're down at the bottom as well, then a similar reality will present itself. So it's really demoralising actually, because that should be the best part of the season for traditional cricket fans, and it runs the risk of being a bit of a hodgepodge because players are going to be out on their feet. They're going to be absolutely done in, and the quality is significantly going to be impacted by that. And also, sorry to rant on about it, but we sometimes watch cricket matches, you and me in particular. We're stuck in a Beckett play or something. And although you don't like plays, sorry, that was a reference that you would have turned your nose up at. But anyway, we've sat and sometimes watched county cricket, Red Bull county cricket, and thought, are the players entirely
Do they want to be there?
committed to being out there on the pitch? And we've whinged on about this, and sometimes with good reason, for sure. But if you are flogging them now, and you have 2 days grace between one game and the next, and you're confronted by a day 4 situation where you're losing overs for a bit of bad light or a drizzly bit of rain. Obviously, in test matches, you extend the day. Well, in 4-day cricket in championship, you don't. So you just lose overs as soon as you're off, even for a little while. And that can look like a nonsense, and it can be frustrating. But if you are concertinaing the schedule to such an extent that you're essentially tacitly saying to players, we don't really care about the quality that much. We don't really care about you delivering to 100% that much. We just have to get it done. And so naturally, players are going to be looking at that and thinking, well, if we can find a session or two with our feet up, if we can get away a bit earlier to try and actually get home to rest up for a day, try and rest the aching limbs before we got to go again on Wednesday morning, then you can understand that attitude or that reflex, if you like. And it's far from ideal on any number of levels. Ultimately, the fans will be watching it and they will be feeling like this product could be better than it is.
I completely agree. The other thing I'd say on top of that is that I think already in county cricket, too much of what gives you success in the championship in particular is your ability to recruit overseas players, because of how difficult that has become over the years, especially when it's played in 3 separate blocks that aren't actually that close to each other. And I think this just exaggerates that problem. It's easier to recruit in April and May when there's not that much international cricket. There's the IPL. Other than that, there's not a lot of international cricket. So you can actually attract some of the higher caliber Red Bull specialists going. But in that August, September block, you've got a full England test series against Pakistan next year. So you're going to lose all the test guys for at least half of that run in. And then 2 days after the 3rd Pakistan test is the start of the England-Sri Lanka T20I series. So then you lose the white ball players. And I haven't looked at the full international calendar, but I wouldn't be surprised to see if there were other international series going on at that period. So it's going to be difficult to recruit. And I don't love how it comes when you come to the end of the season, both at the top of the championship, bottom of Division 1, top of Division 2, where these really important positions are in part determined by how well you managed to secure an overseas for a game or two. And I think that's just going to become a bigger factor at the end of the season, which I don't really like. Yeah, I mean, we'll get someone from the PCA on the podcast soon, no doubt, and I'll be interested to see what they think. When I spoke to Hannon Dolby last, he didn't totally rule out the possibility of strike action.
Yeah, I mean, that would be quite something. He's a very reasonable bloke, and he came across very well in that interview actually that you did with him. And it's instinctively my eyes roll a little bit when we talk about player welfare and all of that. But I don't think they're asking for the world. I don't think they ever have at any point. And they've been very clear that the relatively modest, mild changes in the blast have nonetheless satisfied their concerns there. So they're happy with that. That's all good. So it's only really this last run in the last few weeks. But you want the season to respect itself, and you want the punters to be respected watching it as well as, of course, the players. And at the moment, it doesn't feel like that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. That is everything for today's show. Cheers, Phil, and thanks to Ben in his absence. If you like today's show, give us a like, comment, or subscribe on YouTube, or a rating on your podcast app of choice. We'll be back later in the week for our first daily episode of the second test.